So, my name is Stefan. Um, it's Stefan Vartolomeev, a little bit hard to say. So you can just call me Steph, or for the geeky ones, you can call me Steph. I'm a type developer. So I've been developer for well over 20 years. My main language is Java. Sorry for the other people. I'm from the light side. We call it Java Jedis, you know. But in the past 10 years, I've been more in the entrepreneur role. I've been coding ever since, like I never stopped coding. And yeah, the best question will get the one and only copy in Lithuania. So, and it's signed because Patrick made me do it. Okay, but today we are going to we are going to go through a story. And it's a story of technical debt. And when we talk technical debt, it means a lot of smelly code, right? So we cannot proceed before we have safety on. We're going to go deep. No, I'm just joking. Okay, but it all started with a sauna. We had a client of ours. They love saunas, so I cannot disclose it, but you can think of a country and a place. And it was just after COVID. So they had a team of a person and a half. I'm not sharing how they split the person, but they had this team and they wanted to create a new team so that they can take over the development of the projects that were created in a very short amount of time. And given COVID, they had a very strict deadline. They had to deliver a specific set of functionalities, and it was by a specific date, because otherwise their provider, IBM, was going to shut down the servers they were using the system before. So it was a pretty tough situation for the person and a half before us, but we went in and we created a team of 6 very senior developers. So the junior person was 5 years of experience. So you can say like, that's kind of a junior, but average experience was 12 years. So it was like really good team. And we initially got 3 projects, like just to warm up and get going, or at least this is what it was the initial discussion about. Like they were saying, okay, we have these 3 projects, you're going to work on them. And suddenly we start digging up and the business people come up and they say, oh, you know, we need that functionality. And we're saying, we don't know where this functionality is. And then we find we have to support another project and another project. And a couple of months later, we are actually supporting 7, 8 different projects. And there was a particular technical depth to it. We would open a project, it would not build. Literally, we had to build, fix the builds and start from scratch. Then we could not deploy them. Many different reasons. One of them, old build procedure was using Jenkins in the private network of the client. New procedure, use AWS cold build. And we didn't have access to the VPN machines, and there were like 2-3 people who had access to the Jenkins at all in the whole organization. So we had projects running in production, we had the repositories, and we were like, we need to deploy this version like yesterday. They're like, nope, you have to write the, the pipelines. And of course, we had some unsupported versions of Node.js and Java. Fair enough, I said I'm Java guy. I sometimes use gloves and write in Node.js. Just joking. I do use TypeScript. It's more Java-hearted. So, but like they were using unsupported versions of Java and Node.js, which is kind of a problem. And of course, if you are the business person, like the person defining the requirements, you would say, hey, we had just person and a half till yesterday. Now we have 6 developers. Of course, we want all the features, and we want them yesterday because now you guys are senior, you can deliver. It's going to be amazing. Yeah, we couldn't. So where would you start? Any ideas? Like, where would you start? Just shout.
Change clients.
Change clients, okay, that's a good one. Sorry? Meetings, yeah. Endless meetings. Yeah.
We created additional channel stack.
Yeah, okay. Sorry? Builds, yeah, maybe start with the builds. Start from the technical side. Well, we started with communication, and I'm going to remove this because I'm getting hot over here. So we started with communication. Now, we needed to align everybody in the organization that there is a problem. So what I did was I would go and talk to just the people in the office, and I would find the managers in the organization, and I would just add them to a newsletter. So every week they would receive a newsletter. Our team was called the Meerkats. So they would receive the Meerkats newsletter, and we'll highlight, okay, these are the achievements that we did. These are the problems and the pain points, and that's usually a pretty long section. And then like this is the plan for next week and how we are going to tackle it. And this continued for quite some time. I was literally going around and just looking for the proper managers and who to involve. And like we had this whole conversation happening because of the emails. So we managed to negotiate a 3 months cleanup cycle. Yay, 3 months worth of refactoring, right? The way the organization worked is we had the 3 month cycles, like the agile cycles. So every 3 months you plan the next 3 months and you set the goals and you go for it. So we had 85% maintenance, which is basically refactoring and cleaning the things up. And yeah, I mean, have you had the chance to work 3 months just on refactoring? No, right? I felt like a boss. Like, you know, that's good. Yeah, we're going to deliver. And we did quite a lot of work. And that's it. Yeah. Almost. So we did block some of the development items. Like we managed to make the projects build, we have the pipelines in place, like all the basic stuff that you would think about. Unfortunately, the more you go deep into the code, you would understand or you start scratching your head. Why is this done in that way? Like, okay, we know the story. It was like a short timeline. People had to deliver really quick, and there was quite a mess on certain places. It's a fairly complex system in terms of architecture, or I would say over-engineered architecture. But we had quite a lot of questions, why something is done in a certain way. And even when we go to the business people and say, hey, why is this functionality implemented this way? They would scratch their heads or beards, and they would say, we don't know, and it doesn't look right. So then we have to, every time we discover something, we would have to add another feature request or bug report to our list. Have you been in this situation? Yeah? Come on, don't be shy, just shout. Yeah. Okay. And the other interesting part is we started having team conflicts. Because when you clean up the baseline, like, hey, the project is building and now we have to build something new or we have to refactor something, you can imagine people with 10 plus years of experience, 15 plus years of experience, everybody has have their own opinion how things should be done. Of course, we were not fighting about where the bracket should be. There is one way, the Java way, but we were fighting about different patterns that we should use. Actually, most of the projects were done in Node.js, and with TypeScript. So we would discuss how much we want to depend on the TypeScript type system and how complex our types should be. So this was like a constant discussion, and we were going back and forward on this. And of course, like many other things, like people coming from different backgrounds, this team was working first time together. You can imagine people with a lot of experience, they have some clashes on how things should be done. So we did have quite a lot of these items. And we still were not making enough changes. Like, if we make a change, we would be scared out of it. Not a very good place if you had just spent 3 months working on refactoring, right? And of course, the worst kind of thing that happened was the business team, which were giving the requirements, and the management team said, okay, you spent all this time, what happened? Like, they didn't understand what we actually did. Have you been in this situation? You would spend like a week refactoring, and you're like, yes, I have the proper nice thing working, it's slick. They're like, what do you do? Yeah? Had that? Yeah, okay. Oh, I should say, yeah. Hope that was not expensive. Okay, and we came up to this idea, the solution of all of our problems, of course. The silver bullet, it's called the quality criteria. I just name it that way. But it was basic, and that's the thing I want to talk to you about. It's a very simple tool. You can literally do it in like, with your team in 8 to 10 hours. But it helps you communicate with all the parties what is the state of your code. And yeah, it starts with something like this. You know, criteria, it's a set of criterion. So that would be individual statements about our code. We start with something very simple. We want a project to build. Maybe we want our unit test to pass, or maybe true story, there are unit tests because there weren't everywhere. So our integration test pass and unit tests are running locally because this was also a thing where we had a project in the pipeline, the tests were running, in the local machine they were not. We were like scratching our heads for a month. Then we had a couple of more interesting ones, like 60% test coverage, 70% test coverage. The reason for splitting is so you can have it as a checkbox, like it's just a simple yes/no question. And we moved to a little bit more fancy ones, like, oh, we want to use the latest supported version of the language that we're using. And maybe have a README file, how to set up the project and how to run it and how to deploy it. Really nice to have thing. So basically the quality criteria looks like this. There are simple statements that the team agrees on. And this is like the foundation that we're going to build from. Our team came up with 48 items. Well, you can imagine it's like, how does it sound actually, 48? For me, it sounds a lot, but does it sound a lot? Does it sound few? A lot, yeah. You know, last time when I was reiterating this with another team, we came out with different ones, but 50. And I had to stop myself, like at some moment. So it's actually pretty easy to go really high on the number of items. It doesn't really matter if you have 5 or you have 100. Again, it's more of a communication tool. Then these 48 items, what we do as developers, or what we do like in a typical Scrum environment, we have a prioritized backlog, so we want to prioritize our items. So then we can plug them nicely into the sprint. And again, as developer and a little bit of mathematician, I wanted to have some metric system on top of them so that I can come up with a number. And that number we call the quality score. Basically like how compliant a project is with our understanding for the quality, right? If I say a quality is a project builds, and that's the only quality that I have, if the project builds, we have a 100% quality score. Now, this 1,203 is the maximum score that we had. Like that's the maximum score of all the different projects that we had. There were 7 projects that we evaluated. Can you think of a number that would stay on the left side, which would be what was our compliance? 1. We were better, a little bit better. 530, okay. 600, okay. Yeah, 450. Now, that's 37.4%. After spending 3 months fixing stuff, and like we introduced this quality criteria after we fixed quite a lot of things. Now the thing is, the client is working in an industry that is heavily regulated. So when you go to any manager and you say, look, we have a certain set of criteria that we think means good code, And the projects we're working on are only 37.4% compliant with that criteria for quality. Guess what happens in the client's mind, like in the people who work every day with compliance? They just freak out. They're like, is it going to work? Like, how is this still there? So again, it's about communication. Like, it's putting things into an easy to understand form for the other people. Now, it's for the management, so, and also for the business team, the people who give us the requirements. So that to the management to understand, hey, we need to dedicate time for maintenance. For the business team to understand, well, definitely we are not going to ship features as fast as we want because we see the compliance level is really low. So definitely there needs to be some investment there. And what it came out was, initially we did it just for these two groups of users, like these groups of stakeholders. But what it came out was, it was really good for the developers. Because as we were brainstorming the quality criteria, all of these egos of people having all the experience and all the ways they see software being done in a good way, we kind of come together to a unified set. So we had this conversation, which is usually, you never had the conversation with your colleagues, what is good code, right? Did you have the conversation with your colleagues when you joined a new project, what is good code? Anyone? Silence. Yeah? Yeah, I love him. Yeah, I love Uncle Bob, but unfortunately I have to send like 10 presentations to everybody, like and say, watch this and then we can talk. But even if you follow Uncle Bob, there are still nuances and you can do things in a different way. So like we're never having this conversation of, hey, I think the good software is this, and you think good software is that. Let's see where we intersect, where is the common ground. And this was the really great thing about the project. The team was out of 6 developers. They were all living in different places. Like we were across 4 different countries. So we got together just twice a year just to see each other and to, hey, there is a face there. But it was really hard to communicate, and this process really helped. So basically, what is the process and how you can do it with your team? I try to structure it as much as possible, but basically you just brainstorm, you prioritize, evaluate, score, and do planning. And of course there is step 0, as every developer knows, we need to prepare a little bit. Now, in my case, it was very easy to get the buy-in. I was the technical lead and I just said we are doing it. Easy. And nobody objected. Like they knew the problem, so they didn't need like any type of convincing. Of course, depending on the situation you are in, you need to get some sort of a buy-in from the people. Let's try this out. Then I had to prepare some workspace, and because like people would need some examples and place to start with, I did have some ideas on different quality criteria. I just dumped my mind and had like 20 items there. And if you need some ideas, you can go back to this slide. You can take it over after the lecture. Yep. Yeah. How we did it, we used Miro. I don't know if you used Miro. Anyone? Big fan? Yeah? Super easy. You can also do it as, with sticky notes on the whiteboard or whatever. Like, it's super simple thing. At the actual brainstorming, it's a typical brainstorming session. You just have to introduce, look guys, this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to select the quality criteria. We had some idea about it. Like we wanted to have yes/no questions. That's why we had the 60% test coverage and the 70% test coverage. So it's a simple yes/no. It's not a metric. Then we had a very nice criteria which is can be automated. Our dream was we want this to be an automatic dashboard that we can look every day. Unfortunately, most of the criteria that we had, or some of the criteria that we have, they were not automatable. Like, do we have a proper Confluence page with the documentation that is following this template? Pretty hard to automate, doesn't make sense. But we did have this idea when we were throwing ideas about the quality criterion. Can it be automated? Is it project a technology agnostic? Meaning, can we use the same criteria for the Node.js projects and Java projects and front-end projects and back-end projects that we were handling? So this really depends on your team. In our case, we were doing like quite a lot of things. We had Java, Node.js, we had the AWS pipelines, we were doing this in our team, and then we had some front-end projects. So we wanted to have as much of a technology agnostic criteria as possible. We still had some which is like, this is applicable just for Node.js, or this is applicable just for Java. And there was the big thing, opinionated versus non-opinionated. Like, if you go into nitty-gritty details, maybe you want like some of the things to be opinionated. Like, it really depends on the team. Like, that's where the conversation goes. Like, are we more following the opinionated way of doing, or we do want to have our freedom in a way? So these are just ideas on how to say these are the criteria we're going to pick. Of course, brainstorm, and then we decide which ones to stay. I mean, that's like fairly simply said, but this is where the conversation of what I care about in a project and what I think a good project looks like is happening. So I don't have the exact time, but I think the sessions were like between 19 and hour and a half and 2 hours. We did have to cut them at some moment because we were getting like too much into the process. But the conversations that came out of that were really good. So I would say, even if you like have to take a little bit extra time for this, do it, because this is where you understand how your colleagues think, and this is where you can understand them. Then we wanted to prioritize. So we wanted a really nice list of like, this is the most important quality criteria, and the next one is like the second, and so on. We started doing it on the second hour. We had ordered just 6. So we said, okay, it doesn't really work. We cut the session. We started a new session in a couple of days' time. And we decided to make something more simple, which is split it to 2 buckets, must-haves and nice-to-haves. So project builds sounds like a must-have. Having the proper documentation, yeah, nice to have. Right? We know how to do it. It was much easier. But then what we actually did was we ordered the must-haves. We spent some extra time ordering the must-haves, and that came to be much easier. Again, when you're doing it, it's good to have some time box. After we have the quality criteria, you can just think it of as a list of items that you can say yes, no to. Okay, we added needs improvement, or maybe. Not applicable and not evaluated. Literally, we had all of our projects in the Miro board, and in the Miro board across them, we had all the quality criteria in not evaluated color, and then like every developer would go and do one pass and mark in green, yellow, or red the things that they know on top of their head. If you work with like a set of projects, you would know that. And then we had to take some extra time to dig deeper and see, hey, is this really the way it is? So for example, we use RenovateBot. Anyone using Renovate? Just a couple of people. Check RenovateBot. It's something that creates you pull requests for new versions of your dependencies. So it's a really cool thing. We did merge new dependencies every week, so we can keep up to date with this. But there was a shared configuration for RenovateBot for the whole organization. And one of the criteria was do you use the shared configuration for renovate bot? So like something very, very specific, and you have to go and double check it. And when you have the all the items, we go back to our favorite Fibonacci, and we just assign numbers. So these are the numbers that I choose. 5 for the must-have matches, 2 for the partial matches, and then nice-to-haves have value of 3, and partial nice-to-haves have value of 1. So basically, when we have the list of items, we can easily put a value next to that. And this is how we are getting to the end score. And we have one Excel table. Do you know that the saying that every developer goes from like assembly, C, Java, JavaScript, and then it's Excel. Yeah, that one. But yeah, a side note, another fun fact, I did generate SQL queries with Excel. If someone has done that, cheers to you. Okay, but back to this. So we have the nice-to-have, must-have, nice-to-have. Total score will go item by item. It's a little bit blurry, at least for me. I don't know, it's blurry for you. But basically, we have just like the projects, how many matches, how many partial, how many not matching, how many to eval, and not applicable. So very simple table. We did that like because it's not automatic. We did it every 3 months. And so it's like pretty simple to count and to put it. Then the nice-to-haves, same thing, just adding the number and some formula and some coloring and some developer design. We end up with this. Now, the thing you can see at the bottom is the total score, the 450 out of 12,000, and the percentage. And you can see we have some coloring around it. So this is where we put what we call thresholds. So the thresholds are really just percentages of what is the matching we want. And we had 2 different thresholds. One is for the must-haves, because it's good, the must-haves should be higher percentage, and the one is for the total score. And this is really helpful because threshold can give you a glance like, oh, this is red, and I can need to go there, and it's really, again, easy for communication. And of course, the quality score we already talked about. It's very easy to communicate to business people. Next one, planning. Okay, you have this number, you communicate it, people are scared. They're like, oh, the system is going to break like yesterday. What do? What we did was plug it into our typical planning. So the big planning was happening every 3 months, and we used OKRs. Are you familiar with the OKR methodology? Some? Basically, you put measurable goals. So we have a measurable goal where we say, okay, we are going to move from that percentage to that percentage in the next 3 months. And of course, first time is always a guess. We did set our first goal from 37 to 45%. It was kind of a round number. It had like, it's almost 8%, which is infinity. I don't know, I mean, it was just, the stars told me it should be 45. But it was really just a guess. We didn't know what we can achieve. And then the second time, we set a goal from 56.8 to 70%. Now, you might be wondering what happened with the gap from 45 to 56. Well, after the first cycle, where we dedicated time to fixing stuff, we actually managed to move from 37 to 56%. So that was pretty good. And like people were pretty happy about it. But you know, that's still just extrapolation. You can do a bit more refined thing, but we would just add it, use it as a kind of guiding thing that we plug it into the process. And it's important to plug it into the process so you can have, in our case, we had a maintenance sprint. So out of the 3 months, we will take 2 weeks and we will just do maintenance. So that's our refactoring time. Or the other way we did it, sometimes we didn't have the comfort of doing the maintenance sprint. We would have like a dedicated capacity every sprint to do a little bit of work. And because the items are prioritized and you see the projects that are like the red ones, you can focus your effort, and this is how you do the prioritization. So it's fairly simple framework from there. And of course, just repeat. Now, a couple of pitfalls that we faced. Yeah, we had quite a lot of criteria. Like initially we had more than these 48. They were not, like, not all of them were yes, no ones. Some were pretty hard to measure, so it would take quite a lot of time for the team to check it out. We did want to have automation. We didn't manage to. It's the holy grail still. I could definitely see how you can spend too much time debating. That's why you have to, like, sometimes you have to say, okay, we're going to have less items in our quality criteria, but these are the items that we all agree, and we're going to debate next time. So that's one trick that I used. And then also the pitfall of too much time spent on prioritization. First time, it's not going to be perfect, neither will the second time. Just to see how basic our criteria was in certain sense, we didn't have section for security. We had a couple of different sections, like we had the ideas of like project builds, code quality, REST API quality, and so on. We had the section of security, and we never brainstormed a single item there. Not because we didn't have the ideas, but it was getting too much. So even something as important as security, we left it over, and we knew we were going to revisit it after some time. And then you have to just iterate. You can iterate on the criteria, which is I would say the most important thing. The thresholds, you can change it time to time, but I don't think it's really that useful. And of course the goals, like you have to iterate every sprint or every cycle or like longer period of time to set some goals. And that's basically it. It's a very simple methodology, but what I've found out is it's really helping people understand what's the state of the project. And if there is one big thing that we are lacking in our community, that's proper communication. Making it simple for non-developers to understand there is a problem. If we go and say, hey, there is a problem with that database, it's not connecting, the connection pool is failing, something like a business person, like a non-technical person will just like fall asleep. So, yeah. That's what I wanted to share with you, and I'll be happy if you have some questions. Yeah.
First one here.
Yeah, thank you for that nice talk. Actually, I've got a question about that reiteration and revisiting. Any even healthy project will, the technical debt will grow with the time, and either you would like to add some criteria and the max score will grow, or just the actual score will drop with that. How do you manage this? How do you then communicate the dropping score to managers? Won't be the team demotivated by the dropping score, or how do you do that revisiting?
No, I think it's actually, as developer, when I go back to my code 1 year ago, I say that's shit. I don't know if I have to say this word. Sorry. This means I learned something and now I can write better code. Or I learned something and I can do use better practices. Or I can use different technology which is better. So it's absolutely normal that as we evolve as developers and as the team evolves, we'll add additional things. In our case, we added the baseline. Like we thought these 48s are really like must-haves, nice to have, but these nice to have, so like proper documentation is kind of key. So it's completely normal to have this iteration of adding new stuff, and then yes, your total like the number grows, and your percentage drops. But that's easy to communicate because you say, look, we improved our quality criteria. Now we require more from the team, and we keep the team to a higher standard. So that for the managers is amazing. Like they say, okay, we were producing something and now we're going to produce something better. So that's great. And we are going to start touching different areas. And you can always communicate both numbers. You can say we were like that much compliant with our quality criteria in the initial phase, like on the old criteria. Now with the new criteria, it will drop with 15% or whatever number. Yeah. Did I manage to answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Next question. I'm going to go on this side. Go for it.
Oh, okay. First of all, yeah, thanks for the presentation. It was really useful, and you can see that it was from real life, so that's great. I have a question, a couple of really. Let's imagine that business decided to discontinue the support of your current project. And for 2 years they discontinued it, and they decided to get back to it again. So don't you think that the team that will start to support it after 2 years of no work done will stumble upon the same stuff that you've talked about, their own code styles, new Node.js versions and that stuff?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, like what we don't understand, or I think the industry lacks, is software is a little bit like building. If you leave a house in the open air, like nobody lives in a house, and you visit it after 10 years, it's going to get rotten, right? If you leave a software and come back to it 2 years later, it's already rotten. And that's the thing, like even when you have the quality criteria, I would say when a new team comes together, yes, you can evaluate it towards this quality criteria, but it's best to have the same process to have the new team understand what is their understanding of quality, because maybe it's different. So I don't know if it answers your question.
Yeah, but you answered it. Yeah, but the second question is: don't you think that the whole IT infrastructure, in a whole, makes any support of a project as an unending job, as a rat race? Can something change in future, or
No.
we're all doomed for this fate?
We're doomed.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
Like if you have okay, maybe we can have AI merging pull requests, updating libraries, and doing all this stuff for us someday. But I really like to think about it as like if you have a garden, you have to mow it like every week, right? Same is with IT. Maybe it's boring, maybe it's like stupid, maybe we don't want to do it, but it's part of the work. And when we build something, we have to take care of it. So that's like part is the let's say the boring one. That's why I love Renovate Bot, because like this is the first time I saw it. Like the whole organization, it was updating libraries every week. Like I never saw that. Like in my typical project, updating a library was happening every 2 years, like because everybody is scared. And then when you do update of the libraries in 2 years, like everything breaks, of course. So as much as you can automate in that sense, like I'm talking about dependencies, but same is for infrastructure. Like services die out, and then we have new services coming out. Versions of the databases phase out, and then you have new versions. Same for Java, and like everything is just moving. So you have to keep running and keep running and keep running. That's part of the job, unfortunately.
Yeah. Great questions. Great questions.
Yeah.
I'm going to go away. Let me go all the way to the back first. Go for it.
Hi, Stefan. Thank you for your brilliant presentation. I have a question.
I'll move because it's just in my eyes and I cannot see you. Hi.
I have a question about the criteria, because you mentioned the easy criteria like the percentage of test coverage, and this is okay, but in many projects that I've seen, the criteria of tech debt would be something like how it is easy to make some changes, to add a feature, for example. And it depends on features, and it depends on the code itself. So what would you recommend, which approach would you recommend to evaluate this criteria of how easy it is to add a feature to the project?
I don't think that's measurable, unfortunately. We had a discussion this morning with one of the other speakers, because we say refactoring will make adding features easier, right? And faster. Does it really does it? We don't really know. If you want to know, you have to have two developers, like clone the same developer, put them in parallel. One would implement it on the old code, one would implement it on the new code, and then you have clear result which one is better. And the refactoring that you did in the architecture that you have, it's only good for the current knowledge of the project. So when you have 10 different new requirements, like this architecture might be already outdated. So that's kind of the problem with how easy it is to add new features. Well, depends on the feature. Like changing a color button can be like as simple as I go to the CSS and change it. But if it's part of a design system and I have to go to the designer and convince them that they need this new color, it might take months, right? So it really depends on the feature and the context. That's why we didn't stick to this level of it's not detail, it's like something that cannot be measured. Now, we did have some quality criteria, like do we have this ESLinter configuration enabled? We had a funny, do I have time for a little bit longer story?
Yeah.
Okay, so we had this issue where we would run in AWS Lambdas. There is a Node.js process, and we just call set timeout. Right, so we're going to execute something in the background. And the Lambda finishes, so the process finishes, and then the code in the set timeout is not executed. Any person who knows why this happens? Yeah, okay, one. It's actually not terminated. I'll just repeat for the video. The guy said it's because the Lambda container was terminated. It's actually paused in most cases. So when you see the next request coming, you would see the log message outside of the set timeout appearing if it's like for a short amount of time. But that's because of the way billing works in AWS, and they had to secure that nobody is running code on the backside, like in the background. And this was something we chased for like 2 weeks until we figured it out. And we had a very strict policy: no await with no async without await, and no set timeouts. So this is how we set up. And this was a linter configuration. So we put a linter configuration, and this was part of our quality criteria. It was Node.js projects only. ESLint has this configuration.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
If you're interested in anything developer productivity, since you mentioned Miro, they're going to publish how they measure developer productivity as well as quality somewhere in October. So you can look forward to that as well.
Hi, thanks, Stefan, for the talk. Could you please elaborate a little more on the definition of the project? Because it's quite obvious how to apply some metrics to the code base, to CI and deliverables. But when we are talking about different projects that may consist of, like, represent the whole delivery for the system, then there may be metrics like the quality of the whole architecture, whether the process for each project is established correctly. What is, like, how to define discrete metric for delivery itself?
Yeah, thanks. Very good question, and you win the cat books because I haven't heard the other ones. In our case, definition of a project was a repository. We started from the very basic things. The setup was it was a microservice environment. We had tons of lambdas running around. We had tons of services, but we went on the repository level. First, because we were just part of the whole system. So, like, just in GitHub, we had like 300 to 400 projects. And you can imagine, like, that's like some of them dead, some of them in production and nobody knows where. But like there were quite a lot of projects there, and our team was responsible just for about 10 of these. Like, and some come and die, and like so we were maintaining mostly 7. But you can do this on any level. That's the thing. You can say, like, we did it on the repository level because that's closest to the developers and that was easiest to manage. You can do it on architecture level if you have a couple of different systems and you want to unify the architecture across them. You can just have architectural quality criteria and what it means for architecture to be good in the sense of your organization. I don't know if it helps. Yeah.
All right. More questions?
Hi, I'm Roni.
Hey.
You mentioned that at the company you guys worked on adding quality criterias and adding standards to make sure every project has good quality. I'm assuming that came at the expense of slower delivery, which means clients were less happy, which means the business was less happy. How do you handle this new culture? At our company, we kind of developed a culture of delivering fast, and afterwards creating, while delivering fast, creating tickets for refactoring some components or making them better afterwards, so we can at least deliver quickly.
Good question. First, I would say it's not really about how fast you deliver things in most cases. We're talking about an organization which has like 5,000 employees. Development team was about 100, or still is 100, 150. So it's a pretty big organization. In such organizations, you do have some deadlines, but what is more important than deadlines is predictability. So what this gives is some sort of predictability. Like, it gives you the tools to communicate and to say, look, guys, we need to tackle this problem sooner or later. We can do it after 1 year. It's not a problem. We are going to keep track on it. And we did have 2 cycles like that where we could not work on our maintenance, on our quality criteria, because we had to ship very big functionalities. They had very strict deadlines. They were publicly announced, and we had to ship that. But what we did was, every time we had the planning for the next 3 months, we would evaluate and say, look, this is where we are. Like, okay, it's degrading. That's okay. We know why. We have to invest the time afterwards. And in the past cycle, they invested quite a lot of time fixing a lot of the things they did in the past 6. So that's completely normal process. What I think you're touching here is one misconception that I see a lot of people have, and I personally had before having my own development company. As a developer, I would praise myself if I deliver feature fast, right? And if I don't deliver the feature by the time I said I'm going to deliver it, what I do? I do overtime. I work over, I might not even sleep. I will sleep on the, while my tests are failing and so on. But I would work extra time to make sure I'm keeping up the deadline I set. What I learned after having my own company, started talking to clients, is they don't care. Like, you said it's going to be delivered on Tuesday. If you say, look, guys, we had a problem which we didn't foresee, and it's going to delay us with 3 more days. If you say it a week ahead, they're like, sure, take it, as long as we have the proper launch. So I think that's part of the mentality that we insist on ourselves, because we want to be good professionals. We want to ship on the right time. But business is not like that. Like, they need predictability, and the more you communicate, the better it is. Like, if you say, I'm not sure I'm going to deliver this feature on this date, it's okay. We can sit on the table, we can cut the scope, so we can deliver it way before that, and we can expand it. Actually, with the last 6 months, we had 2 such cases there. We had a scope which we sit with the whole team and say, it's pretty big. We're not confident, so we cut down the scope to something very minimal, and then said, these are the optional items, and we expanded. And that was perfectly okay. I'm not saying it's going to be working in your organization, because I know there is a big difference, but I just see this pattern, and that's like one of the hardest lessons learned for me. It's more important to communicate on time than to spend the extra hours.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said. Yeah. There was another question over here.
Thank you, Stefan, for the talk. Very insightful. So I have 2 questions. First one is, so what was the final score the team managed to reach, and over what time period?
It was this... No, I'm not going to remember it. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. And the second one is, did you notice any significant improvement in developer satisfaction when you adopted this process?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Happy developers pay dividends. Another question here.
Hi, Stefan. So I want to ask more about a question that was already asked. Like, if a client comes to you with a already existing project, and it has a lot of code, and you see that like you set up these success criteria, and you see that the code needs to be refactored, like a lot of the code needs to be refactored, but the features that the client suggests will break a lot of the new code, and then the refactored code will be need to be a lot of the code will be need to be changed. So how do you manage that? Do you first refactor the code and then develop the new features and then refactor the code, and then or first do you try to implement all these success criteria, or do you develop features and then?
Yeah, thanks for the question. First, I don't think you should aim for 100% coverage on the on the quality criteria. Why? Because we should aim for perfection, but good enough is good enough. I would say 80 to 90% is like amazing. If we reach 80%, I'll be yes. It's time to reevaluate what is our criteria. My approach to your case, where we have a new feature and I know I have a bad code base, is actually coming from Uncle Bob. Like someone there said, Uncle Bob. He's like, leave the campground cleaner than you find it. So if I would go to the code and add some new functionality, I'll clean around it. But I'm not going to do it just for the cleaning around, because that's investment of time that might never come back. Weirdly enough, one of my most successful projects, in a way, was a system that I was totally ashamed of. Like, we had a freelancer, he delivered like a couple of, like one system for organizing virtual events. And I mean, I looked at the code and I was terrified. But it worked, it worked. And we finished the event, like it was nicely held, everything was working and there were no glitches and stuff. And then there were 5 other organizations in 5 other countries who said, we want to use the same platform. It's like, not that platform, it's... And we used it, the same bad code that we had over there. I mean, I couldn't resist, I fixed a couple of things. Like, I made them better, but they didn't really add to the value of the end product. So this made me realize investing into making things nice for me is not always adding value to the customer. Of course, I can do it in my free time because I appreciate my work and I want it to be of a good quality. But if it's not adding to the business, I shouldn't charge the client. So that's my perspective on it. And unfortunately, we cannot say the refactoring I'm doing now is going to be better for you. So what I would do is, if I start with the client, and this is what we do in my company, we have a template of the quality criteria. And then when a client comes, we say, okay, we need to have a conversation. What is the quality that you expect? These are the good practices that we have. So, but some clients say, no, I don't want, like, I don't care about like unit testing, for example. And we argue why it's good or bad and so on. And we can decide to move it from 80, which is our standard, to 60 or to 50. And it's about communicating and figure out what's the need of the client. Sometimes like these are too technical for them and you have to take the choice, but it also like helps you say, these are the things that I care about. I don't know if it's answering your question. Yeah, okay.
I have one question from Discord. I'm going to ask it because I got a few upvotes. It specifically has to do with the quality criteria that you presented. And this person mentions that they're mainly output metrics, which I think I agree on. They're not outcome metrics. This question was posed before you got into OKRs. So in practice, those output metrics are hardly understood by non-technical stakeholders. You also mentioned that. But how do you then answer questions like, what is the business value? Let's say if we work on tech debt or these output metrics, or what is the impact on the business?
Well, I think you can always defend what is the business impact if you don't have documentation. Like, enrolling people is hard. And that's case by case. But usually, like, everybody is busy. Like, if we are walking in life, when you go to work, we are busy. Like, we have our job. And managers, they don't have the time to ask every particular thing to understand it deep enough. We like to think that they will come and understand everything that we do, but they don't. So that's why I think having a simple number is very good for that, because they are just, oh, I see a number, now I understand. If I measure it, I can correct it. Now, if they see there is something fishy happening after a couple of months, they can go and start asking you, what is it? How did you came to it? They can ask questions, and then you can translate what it means, like the outcomes, like what they actually mean for the project and for the future, and why did we choose them as a team. So that was my approach. And nobody asked me for the specific criteria. They just look at the number and they were like,
Very nice. We have only a couple minutes left, so this is going to be the final question.
So yeah, my question would be, you explained the benefits of this quality system, but what are the unforeseen drawbacks? Because you didn't mention any like concrete drawbacks which this quality system has with all of the numbers.
Well, I think a drawback is you might fight with your teammates, because like if the personalities are such, you can like get into a fight. But I still think this is a good thing, because then you come to the truth and you come to the consensus. I don't think there is a particularly bad thing about it. I mean, it's a tool, and you can apply it in certain situations. I haven't seen it backfire in any way. Like I haven't seen somebody saying, "Oh, you have this number and you're not doing anything about it," or I don't. Like, it's just a communication tool. And I don't think there is like anything specific that is backfiring. But if you think about anything, I'll be happy to discuss.